Thai King Maha Vajiralongkorn greeted his subjects for the first time since his crowning in a royal procession last Sunday as part of intricate coronation ceremonies held over 3 days. Long live the king shouted well wishes who lined roads along the 7-kilometre route from the Grand Palace to 3 royal temples from early morning to well into the evening as fairy lights lit the streets of Bangkok's Old Quarter. Wearing yellow, the colour associated with the king, the crowd hoped for a glimpse of the constitutional monarch who is revered in Thai culture as a living deity. The Thai government spent 1 billion baht, or $31.4 million, on the weekend's coronation ceremonies. The coronation of King Vajiralongkorn 66 took place from Saturday to Monday, May 6, after a period of official mourning for his revered father, who died in October 2016 after having reigned for 70 years. In a rare initiative, a 5-star hotel in Dhaka and UNICEF Bangladesh have signed an agreement to raise money for development of the underprivileged children of Bangladesh during the holy month of Ramadan. Under the agreement, as part of the campaign titled Every Child First this Ramadan, Hotel Le Méridien will support UNICEF Bangladesh by contributing $1 per customer who purchases Sahri and Iftar buffets from the hotel. Besides, the campaign will enable hotel guests to make donations in 3 boxes that will be placed in the hotel throughout Ramadan. Money raised will be used to strengthen UNICEF's work on core issues, including the reduction of preventable newborn deaths and the lowering of child and mother mortalities. The cash will also help provide better nutrition for children and go towards efforts to reduce levels of stunting. Ramadan began in Pakistan on Tuesday, May 7th, a day after most other Muslim countries started observing the month of fasting. The very first day of Ramadan saw thousands of Pakistanis thronging food markets across the country in search of groceries that are considered essential staples for sahur, beginning a day of fasting, and iftar, breaking fast, at dusk. However, the soaring prices left many lower and middle-class customers in despair. Where should the poor people go? Someone tell us, what should the poor man do? We're totally devastated, said Rehman Khan, a security guard in Islamabad. Our only request is that prices should be reduced, at least for the month of Ramadan, he pleaded. The Muslim-majority country is faced with widening fiscal and current account deficits amid spiraling inflation. According to the Pakistan Bureau of Statistics, PBS, the consumer price inflation, CPI, hit 8.21% last month, the highest level since June 2014. On Monday, May the 6th, the Pakistani government increased fuel prices by up to 6.45%. Since most goods in Pakistan are still transported via road, consumers fear that the increase in petrol and diesel prices will result in even greater price hikes. Islamabad businessman Abdul Hamid Abbasi said prices were so high that their household budget had gone haywire. Tomatoes, lentils, sugar and flour had become too costly after petrol prices were raised, he said. Ramadan, the 9th and holiest month in the Islamic calendar, is one of the 5 pillars of Islam and is the time of the year when religious fervour is rekindled throughout the Muslim world. It is a month of austerity and of exercising self-restraint, during which fasting Muslims abstain from eating, drinking, smoking from dawn to sunset. Pakistan is a predominantly Muslim country where more than 90% of its over 200 million people practice Islam and most of them fast during the holy month. A Pakistani charity in the teeming coastal metropolis of Karachi is serving up a rare treat for the city's Muslims ahead of their fast for the holy month of Ramadan: ostrich meat. Expensive and seldom eaten in Pakistan, ostrich is deemed exotic in the mainly Muslim nation of 208 million people. In this city, there are big billboards and costly iftar meal to break one's fast and buffet dinners, which even a middle-class person can't afford. Keeping this problem in view, people supported us, and like previous years, we're offering dishes that even middle-class people can't afford, let alone the poor, said Zafar Abbas, the General Secretary of the Jafaria Disaster Management Cell Welfare Foundation. The flightless birds were brought to the venue in Karachi before they're slaughtered, cooked and dished out in the early hours before dawn breaks, when Pakistani Muslims began their month-long Ramadan fast. Volunteers stewed the red meat, said to resemble lean beef with a gamey flavour, in cauldrons and served it in a chickpea curry to more than 500 residents. Abbas said the plan was to offer deer and other expensive cuisine in coming days during Ramadan, when practicing Muslims abstain from eating, drinking and smoking during daylight hours. Ostrich meat costs more than mutton and chicken in Pakistan, selling for 1,200 rupees or $8.50 to 2,200 rupees $15.50 per kilogram, compared to chicken, which costs around 300 rupees or $2.10 per kilogram, and mutton at 950 rupees or $6.70 per kilogram. A van driver, Mohammed Hussein, said it felt very nice. I had never eaten ostrich. It was so wholesome, he said, that he didn't feel the need to eat for the next 2 days. With food prices generally rising during Ramadan, handouts from the wealthy serve as a major source of relief for those living in poverty. Dozens of protesters gathered outside India's Supreme Court this week, a day after a panel of judges dismissed a sexual harassment complaint against the Chief Justice, carrying placards demanding a new and impartial investigation. A former court assistant accused Chief Justice Ranjan Gogoi of having made unwanted sexual advances last year, the most high-profile case in a wave of sexual harassment accusations after a #MeToo movement swept the country. Gogoi has denied the charges, and an internal panel of judges cleared him of wrongdoing, a court statement said. But protesters gathered on the street in the Indian capital said they were not satisfied with the decision. Security was strengthened outside the court, with dozens of paramilitary police and trucks carrying water cannons deployed in the area. Police quickly dispersed the crowd, and most protesters were taken away in police vans soon after they gathered.
Amir Ali is a Rohingya refugee in Bangladesh.
Amir Ali is a Rohingya refugee in Bangladesh. He's homeless now and doesn't have much to his name. But for the first time in decades, he's free to play his violin.
And gathers and plays music on Tuesdays.
He said usually the band gathers and plays on Tuesdays and the audience enjoy their music. When they were young men, Ali and his band used to play at weddings back in Myanmar. But over the years, a government crackdown silenced their music. Myanmar imposed wide-ranging restrictions on the Rohingya, banning them from travelling, gathering groups, and expressing their ethnicity. Getting permission to perform together was soon impossible. Finally, in August 2017, soldiers arrived at Ali's village in northern Rakhine State and burned it to the ground. The violinist said when they fled from Myanmar, he couldn't bring anything except the clothes on their backs. I didn't have a chance to grab my violin, he said. 730,000 Rohingya fled into Bangladesh, including Ali and his band, in a sweeping crackdown the UN says was executed with genocidal intent. Now, home to close to 1 million people, the camps here make up the world's largest refugee settlement. But it's also a new stage for Ali's band. Ali managed to save up enough rations to buy a new violin, and with it, a small sense of freedom that he didn't have in Myanmar. He says whenever he's sad and misses his home, he lets loose on the strings. It brings him joy in an often bleak refuge. U.S. Vice President Mike Pence said this week that the U.S. hoped the release overnight of 2 Reuters journalists jailed in Myanmar for over 500 days signaled a positive and permanent respect for a free and independent press. Pence spoke in Washington before his formal remarks to the annual Washington Conference on the American Conference. He said in America and across this hemisphere, they believed in democratic ideals, including the freedom of expression and the freedom of the press, and they welcomed the release of these 2 journalists. Walone, 33, and Kwao So-u, 29, had been convicted in September and sentenced to 7 years in jail in a case that raised questions about Myanmar's progress towards democracy and sparked an outcry from diplomats and human rights advocates.
Including the freedom of expression and the freedom of the press, and we welcome the release of these 2 journalists.
The vessel was unveiled in the southern South Korean city of Busan at a festival marking the diplomatic delegations. Envoys representing the Korean dynasty regularly visited Japan between the 17th and 19th centuries. The delegations left Korea from the area that is now Busan and sailed to Tsushima Island in Nagasaki Prefecture. They then made their way to Edo, present-day Tokyo, visiting various places along the way. The envoy ship was reproduced by South Korea's National Research Institute of Maritime Cultural Heritage, based on old records. About 900 pieces of wood were used to build the 35-meter-long vessel, which took more than 3 years to complete. At the festival, many people gathered to photograph the envoy ship. A local woman who boarded the vessel said it was like being on the real thing. She said current strained bilateral relations might improve if they could use the old days when the two countries had deep cultural ties and were more at ease with each other as a model. At the festival, about 1,300 Koreans and Japanese walked through central Busan together. They included local citizens dressed in traditional Korean dynasty attire and Japanese visitors from Tsushima, Shimonoseki City in Yamaguchi Prefecture, and other historic areas. The ship will sail to Tsushima in August, where it will be put on display. North Korea has conducted a strike drill for multiple launches, firing tactical guided weapons into the East Sea in a military drill supervised by leader Kim Jong-un. Giving orders for the test firing, North Korean leader Kim stressed the need to increase the combat ability so as to defend the political sovereignty and economic self-sustenance of North Korea in the face of threats and invasions, a report said. The statement came a day after the test firing, which analysts interpreted as an attempt to exert pressure on Washington to give ground in negotiations to end the North's nuclear program after a summit in February ended in failure. Local governments are ramping up mosquito control efforts with the start of May, especially northern Gyeonggi-do province regions which are at a higher risk of malaria and are employing various methods to combat the seasonal nuisance. Efforts to prevent mosquitoes from breeding are underway near a small stream in Goyang, Gyeonggi-do province. The focus is on eliminating mosquito larvae. Water flows slowly on streams, creating an ideal breeding ground. A closer look into the water shows several larvae floating around. Since May the 1st, Goyang City divided its area into 13 sections and has been conducting vermin extermination work every day ahead of the summer season. In the case of mosquitoes, it's most effective to find and exterminate them while they're still in the larva stage. Last winter was warm, so more mosquitoes are believed to have survived it. Gyeonggi district in Goyang has decided to increase the frequency of such operations by some 20% this year. The public health clinic in Paju City is also on high alert, following its designation as a central hub for malaria surveillance. Paju officials are lending 120 light traps and an equal number of portable sterilizers to local residents. The city has also organized a joint municipal, military and civilian task force involving army units and 29 private organizations. Paju is a large city, so control measures are not feasible. Autonomous efforts by the private sector are necessary. Also starting this year, Paju will employ more diverse methods to maximize efficiency, including the use of drones in areas that are hard to reach. A group of 60 koalas, the world's largest overseas population of koalas outside the birthplace of Australia, is meeting with tourists in South China's Guangzhou City, Guangdong Province. The eldest of these koalas is 17-year-old Uki. She is one of the 6 koalas that came to Guangzhou Chimelong Safari Park in 2006. With one son, 2 grandchildren, 1 great-grandchild, 1 great-great-grandchild, and 1 great-great-great-grandchild that was born last October, Yuki is now living with her 6th generation. Considering that koalas usually live for 10 to 12 years, the 17-year-old koala is about 100 years old in human age, thus attracting quite some attention from the tourists and also receiving more care from the breeders. Another big family in the group is the Murrumbidge family with 6 generations, the youngest of which was just born on February the 2nd this year. Bolivians flock to the nation's very own fight club, the Tinku Festival or Encounter in the Quechua language. Early May in the town of Macha, the small central square was transformed into a makeshift fighting arena with fist flying and blood flowing in the free-for-all. The origin of the ritual fight is unclear. Some link it to ancient land disputes between communities. Others say it recalls the era of colonial exploitation when peasants were forced to mine silver. Others say it's a blood offering to Mother Earth. Whatever its origins, the festival pits members of rival clans in hand-to-hand combat amid a raucous and often drunken festival. The violent face-off between families or communities during the first week of May can be seen in many dusty, remote Bolivian towns like Macha. Numerous brief and bloody, the fights carry on throughout the afternoons, with only temporary truces to allow the self-styled warriors to down the local corn-based drink chicha that boosts bravado. Among the onlookers, many young women cheer for their favourites, some of whom, desperate to impress, even go as far as to challenge their own relatives during the festival, which is overseen by community elders. Two elephant calves that had fallen into a pit in Galkiriyagama, Sri Lanka, were rescued this week after struggling the hole for nearly 3 hours. Wildlife officials had to use an excavator to cut an escape path for the baby elephants. One calf climbed out of the pit immediately and joined its mother, but the other had to be helped out by the excavator, and once out of the pit, it refused to leave the area. Both calves had fallen into the pit located on private land, and local residents said the two elephants' mothers tried to rescue them but were unable to do so. After the rescue effort, villagers and wildlife officers said they used loud crackers to chase the baby elephants back into the jungle, where they eventually joined their mothers. A 24-year-old woman who struck Australian Prime Minister Scott Morrison with an egg this week as he campaigned for a May 18th general election has been charged with assault, police said. Morrison rubbed his head briefly after being grazed by the egg, which did not break, and then helped an elderly woman who was pushed to the floor in the scuffle. The Prime Minister had been attending a Country Women's Association event in Albury. Security guards pounced on the protester, who was wearing a beanie and casual clothes, and dragged her away moments after the attack. In March, a teenager smashed an egg into the head of a controversial right-wing Australian lawmaker who had blamed New Zealand's mosque shootings on its immigration program.
But at the same time, what my concern for was for Margaret,